Hello and welcome to another episode of the Leo Alves Podcast. And in today's podcast episode, I have an amazing guest with me, someone I've been looking forward to speaking with for a while now, and I'm really happy to have him on, Mike Doehla. I won't say too much. I'm gonna let Mike introduce himself, just in case maybe the listener has maybe no idea, or if it might be the first time hearing of you, and then maybe you can introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so where do I begin? Uh, I like to call myself a nutrition strategist because I've always taken pride in figuring this stuff out for people, not just being a nutrition coach or CEO or business founder. The quick story was I started a nutrition company in 2015 called Stronger You. Didn't really know what I was doing, had no real plan. I was just talking about more or less flexible dieting and what people needed to do to achieve their goals, whether it was weight loss, performance, muscle building, whatever. I thought the information out at the time, and I do still feel this way. I think most of the information is garbage. I think it's misleading. I think it's plain wrong. I think people are predators in the industry, and I wanted to do something that basically took a sword to that and chopped its head off. So we got really busy really fast. I quit my full-time job in HR to go all in on nutrition coaching. Within a few years, with no marketing, we became one of America's fastest growing companies. Hired a bunch of people, had a staff of nearly 100 people, ended up selling the company, which was never my real plan. I thought that was kind of interesting that that opportunity came up. My wife was pregnant, so I was like, wait, there's more to life than being a crazy entrepreneur. Let me slow down. So I sold that company in 2020. I'm sorry, 2021, worked with it for about 15 months and then stepped away. But I'm still passionate about the nutrition stuff, so I still share some thoughts. I just don't feel like I have to share them all the time. So it's a little bit I get to take a break. And maybe I'll come back to the industry one day, but as of right now, I'm just a retired dad who did something that was, I guess, pretty cool in the nutrition space. So have a lot of experience. We worked with over 50,000 people in more than 50 countries. We had registered dietitians, PhDs, business professionals, and coaches on our staff. So I've seen a lot of crazy stuff. So yeah, happy to talk about anything.
That's quite a story. I'm sure someone's listening to that and just being like, wow. Yeah, that
Yep.
is yeah, that's a lot of experience right there, which is why I was really excited to have you on as well. I thought um in today's podcast episode, I just like love to speak with you more about like nutrition, just for, like that general everyday person who I know is listening to this podcast now and is going to get like a tremendous amount of value from what you have to say. And you know what, we can just like dive straight into just a bunch of things I had in mind. So as you said, you've worked with thousands of people, and I would love to ask, like, what are some common like types of characteristics and behaviors that you've often noticed in those people who always ended up making significant progress and achieving their goals?
Yeah, I love that question because it's usually people ask like what are the things that are people doing wrong? I like the reframe. What are people doing right? Because I think that's we're so used to seeing what everybody's doing wrong, but we don't talk to the people that actually saw success. So I think for those people, it was like basically throwing the all or nothing mindset in the garbage, which was trained. People are trained that way because of most diets, right? They're like, keto, for example, if you don't eat foods that are quote unquote keto, you are not on the plan. If you are paleo or even carnivore now and you eat a vegetable, like you're not on the plan. But with like a flexible dieting approach, it's like it's much more like a dimmer switch than an on-off switch. So I used to use that analogy a lot. I don't think I came up with it. I've seen a lot of people use it before, but I wanted people to look at this stuff as like if the light was on, they were still doing great. So those people we always talked about kind of just you're always doing okay if the light is on. You cannot go off the plan. I don't want you to think if you make a mistake on Saturday that you also have to eat poorly on Sunday. So I think we did that with like our customer service was kind of crazy. Like we would be accessible at all times. People could text us. So they always had that lifeline. So I think we gave people a lot more grace, or I guess call it we widened the guardrails for people. and they knew that. I think most diets and people that fail on diets are just going off and then they're like, well, I'm over 200 calories, might as well be 2000. I'm just like, that's not how it works, right? We all heard the what is it, the tire
The
analogy.
tire, yeah, yeah.
If you get one flat tire, you're not going to slash them all, right? That would be silly. Another characteristic in the successful people were planners. People, if you have a flexible approach and, say, for example, if you have like a calorie and a protein goal now, if you're not planning that and you just wake up and start eating, it's going to be incredibly hard to hit that protein goal and incredibly easy to go over the calories. Now, we had a lot of people track their macros, and that made it even harder. So there's a lot of people today that are like, oh, you don't have to track macros. And they might be right from a physiological standpoint, but from a psychological standpoint, giving people those macros we found, and we saw great success with it, it forced people into becoming a planner. Because with calories, as you know, like you can eat protein and calories and get similar results. But what if someone has full eggs, bacon, puts butter in their pan, and also has, I don't know, a whole milk smoothie? Like they're blowing through their fat and their calories. So the planners were always doing so well. Another thing was like support systems. I think a lot of people that fail traditionally have someone in their life or some ones in their life that nudge them away from their goals. We would see many of the husbands of our clients be that person because, as you know, the dudes can function on usually more calories. So if they make a mistake or they go out to eat, like the guy might eat 60% of his daily calories, the woman might eat 110%. And we would hear comments like, oh, you're no fun anymore, oh, let's just go out and drink. And it would ultimately like shatter people's results. So people that had good support systems and were comfortable communicating with these people, even if they weren't supportive at first, were doing extremely well. People with community. So like, we had a lot of CrossFitters, a lot of group fitness. I know it's maybe not the greatest thing if someone wants like the best results possible, but the support system that those provide and the consistency and the novelty, call it fun, that it provided, kept people in line. So it was stuff like that. It was just like people knew that if they made a mistake, it wasn't the biggest deal. They planned it out and they had a good support system and good coaches. We hired the right people, you know.
Okay, yeah, yeah. There's a lot you've said there, and a lot
Yeah,
with.
sorry, I just kept going.
No, no, no. That's I love that. I love that. And I'm just trying to think where I can like start. So yeah, absolutely. I have found obviously I can't say I've grown America's largest nutrition company, but even just from my experience, yeah, that planning ahead just makes a massive difference. And I like how you mentioned that calorie tracking just forces the person to become that type of person to plan ahead. Because yeah, I just never had put two and two together like that, but that is very true.
You
And
have
that's
to be aware. That's like when you step back and you say, what is the average person's problem? They have no idea what they're actually doing. Not in an uneducated way, in an awareness way. Like even people that eat well, I say, how many, and this happened all the time. I eat well, I just can't figure this out. And let's talk fat loss for a minute. They're like, I eat well, I can't figure it out. And I say, all right, well, how many calories are you eating? Because like well or healthy or good does not have a number. And we know there's a lot of people that might be overeating some of these foods that are quote unquote healthy. But we also know that if they're not tracking, they're probably not just eating those foods, but they may be eating them most of the time. So the weekends come or nighttime comes, they had a rough day at work, they need a little escape, which is why I try to tell people like build a life you don't need to escape from. And that's my big theory is if everyone loved their jobs, they would be maybe a little bit healthier because they wouldn't be like, ugh, I gotta go to the office tomorrow, crack open the bottle of wine, get me the chocolate, let's just sit down and watch. Then they do it in a distracted manner, which is they don't really know how much they're eating. So I'm a big fan of people having information. Do they have to track? No, but I don't know. If you budget your money, you'll probably be a little bit better with it. And it doesn't mean you have to do it forever, which is my big message is like people are like, oh, macro tracking or calorie tracking is not sustainable. I say, who says it has to be? It just has to be effective for long enough. I don't track a damn thing. I maintain pretty well. Our clients did too. So there's people that rebound and things like that. And the reason that happens is because they put the blinders back on. They don't pay attention. And I want people to pay attention and see what happens.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel like yeah, number one, what you said about people oftentimes when they like their job, you'd find that it helped. I do find that sometimes when people just hate their job, um, don't really have very healthy relationships. Oftentimes food is just like their only like kind of like escape almost you could say, and like their only happiness. So then they turn to food and it's just like and I have seen that quite a few times. I would love to ask as well because I do feel like this sometimes people just don't like I think sometimes to coaches or at least some coaches like you hear tracking you're like yeah what do you mean like of course you have to use like a food scale and a measuring jug for it to work but would you say it was quite common for people to say or you'd start with someone and you'd say okay we're gonna maybe tracking calories is what we're gonna go for and then maybe a few weeks or even months would pass by and you're like hold on something's not adding up here because I've encountered this the odd time and I'm like how accurately are you tracking? And they're just like, I guess this and breakfast, yeah, like what?
Yeah, yeah. So that's all the time, right? I mean, how many times do we see people online? They're like, I eat 1,200 calories. They always pick 1,200 because it's a low number and it's like their selling point. If I tell people 1,200, they're going to know I undereat, so I should be losing weight. They never eat what they think they do. Even when people are tracking accurately, and like the example is like if you cook your chicken 5 more minutes, there's less moisture and the weight is a little off. So like when we talk about tracking, it's usually not the chicken that's the problem. It's usually not a little bit of extra rice or vegetables or whatever. It's that when people track and they don't track everything, the things that they don't track often fall into the category of what people tend to avoid. And there's a word for it like info aversion. If it didn't happen, or I'm sorry, if it didn't track, or if I didn't log it, it didn't happen. And that makes me feel good, right? That makes me protect my ego because my ego is, in my opinion, me. So if I don't do anything bad, I don't feel bad. And it's not that it's bad or whatever. It's like you're just not logging it or making it real. And I was always a big fan of like, hey, no matter what it was, log it. And we would get people to do it because we wouldn't judge them for it. And I think that's like the genesis of why people hide things other than to protect their ego. They hide them because they think the coach has it all together and expects the best of them, which in some cases is the case. But like we were like, hey, no big deal. Like if you let us know what happened and you're pretty accurate, we can do something about it. There's all sorts of little tricks we could use, but people tend to just hide from it. So if you hide from it, it never happened. But there's sayings like, well, the body still tracks whether you do or not, right? And we know that to be the case. And the science of weight loss is pretty damn simple. Like I was talking to I don't know if you know James Krieger, PhD, awesome guy in the industry. We were talking, he's like, there's no more new science that's going to come out about fat loss. Like we know it comes down to calories in, calories out. Now there's a lot of influencers to both sides of that equation, and there are a lot of people who don't do the math correctly and don't get results and then blame the science. And then now you even have coaches that are like, well, my client told me what they're doing and I trust them because I'm supposed to trust people. So it's got to be something else. And it's like, no, it's not necessarily that people lie. Some do. We've had many people tell us after months, like, hey, I wasn't sharing everything. It's that people don't know about it a lot of times. Like they pick the wrong entry in some tracking app. Like I had people tracking chicken breast when they would eat chicken tenders. And I'm like, oh no, no, no. Like you didn't know that. I'm not going to judge you. I'm going to teach you how to track. And we would have examples and things of this stuff. And I'm sure you saw it a million times. If I'm sure you heard stories about when a client would go out for a burger and they would be like, oh, I'm going to pick the 90-10 meat. And we know these restaurants want you coming back. 90-10 burgers don't get anyone back in the door. 70-30 with cheese and bacon and mayo and buttered buns. That's what gets you back. So if you're tracking a burger as 90-10, it's 70-30, you're talking hundreds of calories. You do that over the course of a week, a few other times, and it's, my God, no wonder you're not getting results in your tracking when you're not tracking accurately. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It just means you can't log 100 calories when you had 500. You could probably log 150 when you thought it was 100, and that's okay.
Yeah, often it just comes from a place of like genuine unawareness, which
Yeah.
whenever I do stumble across that, I'm always like this, and I genuinely feel like this is the case. I'm not just saying this. I'm like, this is a good thing we've realized this now
Yes,
because
yes.
now we've realized something new. We've learned something new. Like you said, if you were tracking chicken tenders as chicken breast before, now we know that that's not what we want to be doing, and
Right.
they are different types of food. So what there's like from moving here moving forward from here like we're only going to see even more maybe like more progress now, so
Right.
that's exciting. So yeah,
If
it's
you're
just
driving down the road and you take the wrong exit, don't you want to know as fast as possible? Like, oh crap, I'm going the wrong way. I'm glad my coach pointed that out and we discovered it. Now I backtrack. I don't end up in, 30 miles away or whatever.
yeah, often I feel like sometimes yeah you do maybe get someone who has yeah some form of self-talk in which they do beat themselves up about, but when you've got the coach to really highlight that's fine, you're good. Yeah, that
That's
can
why
really
I
help.
think I think there's a lot of people who are talking about how people shouldn't track now. Maybe they're talking about people without coaches. I think people with coaches who have a watchful, experienced eye do extremely well with it. And I sound like such a snob sometimes because I'll have a coach that's like just starting and they're like, no one should ever track. And I'm like, I have more experience than you on this. I can tell you straight up, people did great. They reported amazing results with both body composition and food relationship with it. Their relationship with the scale improved. So like when people tell me that no one should do this, I'm like, tell me really why. Don't follow some one of these coaches that's projecting their problem to the void, and all these other coaches are picking up. Talk to the ones that have experience with the most clients doing it. They'll tell you it's great.
Yeah, it can work well. And earlier you mentioned like, yeah, just you get coaches and everyday people who just say for some reason just are genuinely convinced or believe that it's not like a question of energy balance now, like calories in, calories out, which it gives me flat earther vibes. It's like we're
Dude, I
way
was gonna
past it.
say that. You took I love that you said it. It's the same thing. If somebody doesn't believe in calories in, calories out, like you're on the same page scientifically as a flat earther to me. Because the people convincing you are the same people or the same type of people that are convincing people the world is flat. It just doesn't add up. There's too much evidence of it.
Yeah, way too much. Like we're way past that point now where it's just like, yeah, I just get those same vibes. Earlier you mentioned, and I was actually going to bring this up, so I really love that you mentioned it. You were like, oh, a lot of people say calorie tracking isn't sustainable, and then you were saying, well, why does it need to be? It doesn't necessarily like. I would
Right.
love to speak more about that. Like, do you think going through a phase of like, I don't think rigidity is the right word, but just being really dialed in and just doing something, yeah, a bit more unsustainable while you're
Yeah.
trying to achieve your goal?
Yeah, so I used to call it structured flexibility. Like you're pretty structured with this stuff, but it's flexible enough where you can enjoy some of your favorite foods, maybe have some days off, things like that. But I think there's too much debate over semantics. Someone will be like, well, it's not restrictive. Restriction is bad. It's like, well, it's literally a form of restriction. But the problem is that you think that word is a bad word. Like people have to be restricted or restrained or nudged to not do the things that they were doing that led them to us in the first place. So I think people just need to ease up and stop worrying about what the definition is and think about like what it actually does for people. Like if somebody's just eating whatever they want and they're gaining weight and they're not happy or healthy or whatever, and we're like, all right, we're gonna have you eat fewer calories, and they say, well, I don't want to do a restrictive diet. It's like, well, by definition, like everything you do to cause weight loss is going to be restrictive because it's stopping what led you here. So let's toss our feelings about the definition out the window.
Yeah, I think so yeah, would you say that perhaps obviously I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would you say perhaps that's maybe like this I'm trying to think how to phrase this like massive push towards everything having to be Sustainable, you could say, is maybe one of the biggest misconceptions people have when it comes to a long-term fat loss that actually like sticks.
Yep. Yeah, yeah. And I think that's the problem with most of life. Everyone thinks that whatever you do now has to be the thing you do forever if it's getting you somewhere. So it's like, no, like I went so hard at the business for 7 years and then I turned it off. Like that wasn't sustainable, but it was necessary to help all these people and to build the life I wanted. So I think the same thing goes for dieting or anything like raising a toddler and a baby is not sustainable. But I know I'm getting out of that phase, right? We're not going to be in that phase forever. And if people were in that phase forever, I don't think many people would have kids. Now, don't get me wrong. I love my children so much. I don't want to rush through this phase, but also the toddler phase and the baby phase together it is extremely difficult for everyone's mental health, right? It's like the puppy phase. Like if someone gets a puppy and the thing is peeing and chewing and making a mess everywhere, it's like it doesn't have to be sustainable. You do it for a reason to train them up and then you move past it. So, yeah, I think sustainability, man, it's like when people are like, if you can't do the diet forever, don't even start it. It's like, no, no, no. Periodization. Like if you want to build muscle, you might do something for 3 straight years and then you might taper back a little bit. So I don't know. I think people just get caught up in like these cliches and then they think, okay, that cliche is what I need to live by. And I'm like, no. Like the saying in business, don't work on the business, work in, or don't work in the business, work on the business. I'm like, it all depends, right?
Mm, mm. Yeah, and I agree with everything you've said just because I used to be that person who would say, yeah, if you can't see yourself doing it for a good amount, like a really long time, then I wouldn't suggest it. But as time has gone on and, I've gained more experience, I'm just like, yeah, you know what? We are going to have to go through a phase of just doing stuff that you're not used to doing. And you're not
Yeah.
going to have to do this forever. But I would strongly recommend if you genuinely want to see results that you do
Yeah.
track your calories consistently, you do use a measuring scale, you do use a measuring jug, etc.
And I would go as far to say the ones that are choosing dietary approaches that are seemingly sustainable are getting nowhere.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They stay the same because they
I,
don't want to push through.
yeah, I often find that the people, just again from my experience, the people who tend to have the best success are the ones that are willing to track their calories. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just like a because they're coming into it already with a different type of mindset. So I don't know if you would call that almost a selection bias, but yeah, it's just maybe the behaviors and the habits that calorie tracking forces. So like you were saying earlier. So yeah, it's just
Yeah.
an yeah, it's very true. I'd love to ask as well. Actually, is there anything else you wanted to mention before I bring up the next point?
No, I mean, to your last point, like if you asked most people, hey, do you want to weigh your food? Do you want to track? They're going to say no. And a lot of coaches do ask that. And then what happens? They get people that don't do it and don't see success. I didn't ask people. I didn't say, hey, I'm going to make you do something you hate. I'm going to say, hey, here's how we get you from point A to point B, and here's the value of it. Here's how we're going to transition from it. And then they were like, oh, cool. I'm bought in. So I think the whole issue with tracking is coaches don't know how to sell it. And I'm not saying like selling it on the website. I'm saying basically convincing people, your clients, of the value of it. And many of these coaches, I don't think they have a lot of experience with tracking because let's think about a lot of people who are in the coaching world. They've always been into this stuff. They always chose the chicken and broccoli. They always chose the workout when they were bored. They always chose to go to sleep. So it's like you have people that are responsible to change others who never use the most effective tool to change these people. So of course they're not going to think it's valuable. That's why I think so many coaches that have had experience with tracking are the best proponents of it for their clients.
Yeah, and to add to what you just said just now, I think there's also that just a thing you can say for lack of a better word, where sometimes coaches where a lot of people who get into the fitness industry and become coaches, oftentimes they've got this isn't always, of course, but a lot of the time you get a lot of people with like really good muscle building genetics as well,
Yep.
who they've never had to worry about even tracking food. or what they're eating. I've got like one or two friends that are coming to mind right now, and they just look great all the time. And they've never even thought about tracking their food, and they don't really know how to educate their clients on it as well.
Yeah.
And that's just yeah, because then yeah, so there is that in addition to what you were
It
saying.
self-selects, like you mentioned before. It's like thinking basketball makes people tall. Like, no, tall people play basketball because they're good at it. Fit people get into the fitness industry because they like fitness and they're fit. It's the
Mhm.
same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So
Surprise everybody. Like that's a lot of coaches out there. They don't know what the heck they're doing. They're just fit.
yeah. It's yeah, obviously with the yeah, so many accounts online. I'm obviously as a Threads someone who's often using Threads right now. I'm seeing that all the time, and I know you are too. Which
All the time. I'm like,
yeah,
that dude is jacked. But what he said is absolutely ridiculous. Yeah.
yeah. And that's exactly why you set up your company in the first place. So it's just always
Nuts.
going to keep happening, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I'd love to ask. So let's say for the person listening right now, they're like, okay. These guys, they're speaking so much sense right now. I'm totally on board with what Mike is saying. I really want to achieve my goal of fat loss right now. What would you recommend to that person? Like, what are your best pieces of advice to help set them up for success?
Yeah, I think I would probably figure out about how many calories and grams of protein I needed. I would probably go to a few of these free websites, assuming this person isn't working with a coach. Getting a good coach is probably step number one for most. But if you're not getting a coach and you want to make some changes, I would go to a few sites, plug in my information, and get the numbers. And I say a few sites because they could be pretty wildly off, and getting a few examples can get you an average. So I'd probably start there for a few weeks. Now, in order to set up the eating plan, I would think of foods in terms of the macronutrients, the proteins, the fats, and the carbs. I would think of dominant macro foods, meaning what foods are primarily protein, what foods are primarily fat, what foods are primarily carbs. When you're doing this stuff, you probably don't want to start with a lot of mixed macro foods because it's harder to adjust when you need certain portions. I would download a tracking app, something like Macros First, MyFitnessPal, one of these things, and I would start logging my food, but I would make sure to plan it ahead of time. I would get my grocery shopping done. I would think of when am I going to eat breakfast? When am I going to eat lunch? When am I going to eat dinner? I would advise people to limit snacks unless it was something that was protein, like a yogurt or protein shake, primarily because snacking, not only I think, and I get pushback sometimes on this, I think it's a bad habit because even if you're snacking on what you would call healthy foods, I think it's very easy once you get off of tracking to gravitate towards the unhealthy foods that are untracked. For example, carrot sticks can easily turn to Doritos or potato chips or chocolates. So I like people to work on their habit of snacking, not only because these foods are extra calories and often unfulfilling, unlike a meal, they are they are often they are rarely protein, and the habit of snacking is often done in a distracted manner, aka mindlessly, also known as food that people never ate, right? People say they eat 1,200 calories, probably 800 calories of snacks in there that they didn't even know about. So I would just do things like that. I would probably get to bed a little earlier if I could. Parents, don't yell at me. I'm a parent too. It's hard to get 8 hours as a parent, but there's a lot of people who aren't parents who are staying up till 1 o'clock playing video games. I would probably advise to not do that. I would lift weights at least 3 days a week. Maybe a full body routine is great. I would get 10,000 steps. I would do a couple days of cardio. And I would rethink a lot of relationships in my life if I were struggling with my weight, because there's a lot of people that might be pulling you down who have been around a long time who are not serving you anymore. And that could be the same for, like a young entrepreneur. Like if you're like 25 and you're trying to build a business and all your friends just want to go out and get drunk all the time, probably not the best idea. And I think fitness and health is the same way. So there's probably a lot more things that people could do, but that's probably a good start. And it might sound overwhelming, but it's not really. There's a few key things in there that I think if they just did that, they'd be in a great place.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I feel like the relationships part that you mentioned is quite overlooked as well. I don't think many people really sit down to think about that, but that can play probably the biggest role, like before anything, because let's say it's in the aspect of the example that you gave earlier, where it's your husband. You might be around that person nearly the majority of your day. And if they're making it more challenging for you, like very challenging, there's something that you have to think about there. And I have had clients like that as well, where it is their husband, you can tell that it's just making it very hard for them. Um, yeah, that's just like it's a tough conversation to have.
It's very sad too. I mean, I've had people realize that they married the wrong person,
Mm,
you
uh,
know?
well,
Yeah.
after working with you guys.
Yeah. I mean, it's like completely different people, unsupportive, just not the person they should be.
I'm sure there's various reasons for it.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I guess maybe sometimes they might not even be doing it intentionally. It's just like, oh, come on, like, yeah, like like you said, like, I know you love dessert and I want you to have dessert and I want you to be
Yeah.
happy. So there could be that as well. Yeah, that's
They look at it like that you're making a decision for yourself, but it impacts me in a negative way. Like a positive for someone, someone changing their health for the better is a positive. But if that means John, the husband, can't have pizza all the time, or, you know, can't like has to maybe make a healthy dinner, like he gets mad.
yeah.
Like, no, don't you understand? Like, maybe your wife being a little happier is a good thing for you. You don't want to give up pizza for that and beers and chicken wings.
Mm.
Like, maybe just limit it.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like to just add to what you've said already, it's often as well on the other side example of like on the opposite example of what I previously gave. Yeah, sometimes it's just, they see their partner making healthier decisions and see them improving themselves, and now all of a sudden they're just like, shit, I should really do something about myself as well, but I don't really want to, so I'm just gonna hold them back. And
Yeah.
hopefully
Yeah.
they just get them to meet me back where I am again, and that often does end up actually working for them. And then
Yeah.
before yeah, so
And
yeah.
that's why some of the most successful people we had were couples, like, or groups of friends. They would
Oh
do it
yeah.
together. It was awesome. Yeah. It was like, yeah, do it. Or not even like signing. The other person sometimes didn't even sign up. They just started doing some of the things the husband or the wife did. And it was like, wow. Like I used to joke like, oh, should I send your husband a bill? Like, you know what I mean? Like he did great because you changed the way you ate and it impacted him in a positive way. Doesn't always go that way, but sometimes it does.
Yeah. It's yeah, there's I think a lot that could potentially be that the listener might have to digest if they do feel like this is maybe relating them with them right now. I don't, would you like to add anything else before I actually ask the
No,
thing ahead of
that's
me?
all good.
Yeah, yeah. Let's say so obviously with just the sheer amounts of nutrition information online right now, good and bad, from 101 or a million and one different voices, each with their own approach to, like air quotes, what actually works or what you should be doing. Let's say someone is trying to start off their fat loss journey, and maybe it's just everything we've already spoken about. But yeah, they're listening to everything and they're just like, I don't know what to do. Everyone is just saying something completely different. I feel completely overwhelmed. Like, what would you maybe suggest to, I get, yeah, and I guess we've kind of answered this already, but like, how would that person even know to who to listen to when you just don't know
Yeah.
anything?
There's like a test everyone could kind of, or like a question they could all ask themselves. Like, is this professional, call it, creating a villain and a hero story? So like what we see now with the carnivore movement, oh, vegetables and this and that is the enemy. I'm going to be the hero and give you just meat. Or the people that are like, oh, it's the ingredients. It's the diet soda. It's the seed oil. Well, I'm going to give you something for that. And like, oh, it's meat. I'm going to give you just vegetables. So like, oh, it's insulin. So I'm going to give you lower carb. Like it's like one, do they break the laws of the physical universe, which is calories in, calories out, energy, right? Do they have people do something that seems a little ridiculous and hasn't been around for that long? And are they saying that they're the ones that are going to help you? Are they charismatic? Because usually, I mean, we know like my theory is a lot of these people don't even believe what they sell. They just do. That's like this is like performative, right? They go on the internet, they get all their clients, and then they go home to their lives and are like super rich now because they just tricked everybody. So
Absolutely.
possibly. And I've had a lot of people tell me like, but you can't sell what actually works. You can't sell calories in, calories out. Well, you don't have to say I'm doing calories in, calories out. You just talk about like, hey, you might just consume a little bit more than you need. I'm going to help you eat the amount that your body requires. I'm going to do it in a way that's mostly nutritious, but allows for you to have like some fun and live life because you're a human. Like you don't have to give up everything. You just have to, restrict a little bit. So I think if I'm proud of anything, it's like selling that to people in a world that didn't think it was possible. So I mean, I get it. I get why a lot of people, like our colleagues, will like think they have to sell out because it does seem easier to just be kind of one of these crazy people that pick a villain and say they're the savior. But that's it, man. And they have so many followers. Maybe some of them wrote books. It's like, don't people know any you could say anything in a book and get published? Do you think like HarperCollins and Penguin and all these publishing houses are verifying this information? No. And the same goes for any topic, business, psychology, all this stuff. So it's like I'm like so jaded now. I read a book and I'm like, yeah, but is that true? You know what I mean? I'm like, they say crazy things about nutrition. Maybe people are saying crazy things about other topics. So it's not easy, but once you find like a crew of people all kind of saying the same thing and are dissecting the studies and talking you through the studies, you start to realize like, oh yeah, I can see what these people are doing. They're trying to trick me in order to buy their stuff.
Yeah. And I've heard from a few established people in the industry as well that that actually happens a lot where people just they're promoting a certain way of eating and maybe saying something you should never eat something, but they don't genuinely even follow or believe what they're actually saying. They just know it
Yep.
gets makes them a lot of
They
money.
don't do it. You
Yeah,
never
and
see them
I've heard
actually
that
eat
actually
it.
happens a lot.
And
Yeah.
one of the main guys, the carnivore guy, he's eating fruit because he said it wasn't healthy. It's like, wow, I mean, I admire him for saying that, but is he gonna stop publishing his book? Is he gonna like change his username? Like, is he gonna not be the carnivore guy anymore? Oh,
Mm.
like that's crazy, right? And people are still they're like carnivore coaching certifications now. Like, what are you guys doing? Like, I'm like, my mind is blown. If you said, Mike, create the most ridiculous diet you could think of as a joke, that would be it. Eating
I,
nothing but meat, butter, eggs, organs. Like, that's ridiculous.
yeah, yeah. I've been saying that quite a bit on social media recently. I feel
Yeah.
like carnivore diet is just it has to be like the worst, one of the worst ones I've ever heard of. And there's been a lot. Like I just think it's ridiculous. And sometimes people will be like, "Oh, well, but what's so bad about what's so bad about that?" And I'm just like, do you really need to be explained as to why eating fruits and vegetables and not eating that and skipping it for months, potentially years, isn't a good idea? Like, do we actually need an explanation, or it just blows my mind? Yeah, I feel like just a little bit of critical thinking with that one.
Yeah, and the problem is like it's extremely hard when someone believes a story, it's extremely hard to convince them that story's not real. And the story we see a lot of times is people were eating whatever, they went carnivore, they lost weight. Oh my God, it was the diet of only meat that did it. It's like, no, you ate in a calorie deficit and maybe you're healthier because you lost 50 pounds, but eat like that longer and sustain that weight, you're gonna get unhealthy soon enough.
Yeah, it's like yeah. You go from one extreme, end up going to the other.
It's like, why
And
can't people just eat normal? Like, just eat normal and eat the right amount. Like, that's kind of it.
too much to ask for. How long did you say you'd been coaching nutrition for, or like just even very into the topic of nutrition?
Like 2014, 13-ish. So a little
Okay.
over 10, like 10 years or so.
because I was even going to say, even I feel like with a lot of these diets, like I'm sure a lot of them even just like they come and go. Like
Yeah.
they're popular and then they die out and then they just come back again, sometimes with a different name. And
Yep. And I
yeah,
can tell you in my time it was paleo, and then it was keto, intermittent fasting, uh carnivore, plant-based, and like, plant-based was probably the healthiest version. I still think that, it most cases, like, just especially in terms of convenience, like eating meat has its benefits. I won't convince someone who is vegan or vegetarian to eat meat. I would never do that.
mm,
But yeah, you see it come and go and all these things. And I joke all the time. I'm like, I want my apologies from everyone that argued with me that I was the idiot. I want you to say, wow, Mike, yeah, paleo wasn't necessary. Keto, yeah, it turns out that wasn't the healthiest. Intermittent fasting, yeah, made me eat a little less, but there's nothing magic about fasting. Carnivore, yeah, man, I probably should have had some fruit and vegetables. Like, I'm waiting for the apologies. It's just they never come. But I've been the same the whole time. Eat mostly nutritious foods, live a healthy overall lifestyle. And if you want some cookies or some drinks or some candy here and there, do it. Because you'll never find someone that checks all the health boxes who eats candy that is unhealthy. You just won't see it. So eat the right amount, lift weights, go to sleep, reduce stress, drink your water. Like, you're going to tick the boxes.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I just had something on my mind. Yeah, as what I was about to say was it just has completely slipped from my mind. But yeah, no, it's exactly as you said. And um, a final point now. Hopefully, what I was going to say can come back to me while we're discussing this. But we discussed calorie tracking quite a lot. When would you say so? Maybe someone, let's say, in the aspect of someone's okay, I've lost a really solid amount of weight. I've hit my
Yep.
goal. I because I have encountered this sometimes, and I've got my own approach for it. But like, what would you often do when someone's like, you look at someone you're probably and you're like, you probably don't need to calorie track anymore. Like,
Yeah.
what would be a good way of coming off of it? Because sometimes people get anxious about stopping calorie
Oh
tracking,
yeah,
doing
very,
it.
very common. And you want to talk to those people and be like, listen, you still have control. Like, you don't have to be perfect. And here's how to do it. And I used to like say it's like levels. Like, for example, so you have someone track all macros, they nail that. Okay, graduate to calories and protein. Okay, you're doing that now, and it's still logged at this point. And okay, maybe you've nailed that and you're maintaining weight. Can you start to eyeball certain things now? Like, can you eyeball the chicken breast versus throw it on a scale? Can you eyeball the rice? Can you eyeball the vegetables? Are you seeing yourself fill in some of your calories with more treats? Okay, maybe that might want to be dialed back a little bit because those things, like I mentioned earlier, when you're tracking them, cool. When you're not tracking them, it's easy to get out of hand quickly. So you can do that, and then you can just maybe just start tracking some meals that are all eyeballed. And this might take a little while. Like, people hit their goal and then they're like, okay, I'm done. And it's like, yeah, but that attitude is exactly what's going to lead you back to where you were. And it won't happen overnight. But a lot of people, what I would see is they would just stop tracking. They would stop measuring themselves on scales or with measuring tapes. And they would just, before they knew it, six months later, they're back where they were. And it's
Yeah.
so gradual, they don't even realize it's happening. Again, because info aversion, they don't want to know it's happening. So if you want to stop tracking, like, you need to do it in a calculated manner. You start by tracking everything and you ease off over time. And then before you know it, you've developed the habits and food personality of a healthy person who maintains their weight. And I think the issue is none of that part is fun. That part doesn't give anyone that reward. When you're tracking and you're losing weight, you're getting that reward. And I tell people, weight maintenance is a lot like anything else. Like, if if you work really hard to get the job, you still need to work hard to keep the job. If you worked really hard to meet your partner, you have to still work hard to keep them. And weight is the same thing. If you don't use it, you lose it. So somehow you have to maintain that effort, but it doesn't mean you need to maintain that precision with that effort.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's exactly as you said, slowly over time. Well, yeah, you definitely, yeah, like slowly over time, it just sometimes it just ends up regressing, and that's why I'm like I'm a fan of just like going through maybe a slight period of what you could even call like a recalibration phase, where you just
Mhm.
like just start tracking again, maybe for a few days, just to
Oh yeah, I
realize.
used to call it a tune-up. Like, all right,
Yeah,
like, and
yeah,
I'll do that if I'm like, oh, I'm losing weight or I'm gaining weight. Like,
yeah.
all right, I guess I need a tune-up. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm not eating enough protein. Or yeah, I'm having a little bit like an extra cookie at night. Let me
Mm.
just slow that down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And funnily enough, I did end up remembering what I was going to say was it was just actually just something quite small, but on the topic of how you were saying you were hoping so many people could just realize actually you were correct the whole time about nutrition approaches, and you don't actually have to, go on all these wacky diets. Where you know what, thinking about it, because I was obviously thinking about it as you were talking about it, and I was just I was thinking like you know what, it's probably just gonna it's more prevalent than ever where people are getting are believing this type of stuff. But I also think it's just easier to really put yourselves in an echo chamber now, obviously with like powerful social media algorithms where it's just going to keep showing you what it knows you like. And there's also that just question of like tribalism where everyone loves to just find someone that thinks like them, whether it's a certain dieting approach, a certain political party, just whatever it might be. Even positive stuff like a language learning, like if, for example, when I have told the algorithm, oh, I'm like I would just like something about le language learning, like when I learn Japanese, I suddenly see so much of it, and then all of a sudden, before I know it, I'm seeing like the same names pop up, and I think like it's very easy just to get in that tribe and that clique, and
Yeah.
before you know it, it becomes a part of your identity too.
Yeah. I mean, right. There's some people that eat carnivore that just change their username immediately. And in some of these people's defense, and I was talking about this at the conference we were just at this past weekend, I said, we were all very lucky to find like all the people who had the good information. They found all these people who just happened to have the wrong information. And to them, it's the same thing. Like, what do you mean? These are all the experts. Look at the data. And it's like, well, you don't know how to look at that data. That's why you believe that. We are fortunate enough to find the right group, and a lot of those people will come over to our side. I mean, if I look in my past, I used to think some crazy things. I used to think, oh, if you eat breakfast, it revs your metabolism. It's like, oh, that's not true. Like that wasn't a thing. That didn't account for any extra fat loss. So maybe I don't eat breakfast. Like, so they're probably just a little bit behind us, but it will take them to acknowledge that they were wrong, which people are incredibly bad at. So I don't
Yeah,
know. I'm hopeful, but maybe they'll jump to another wacky diet, which is
yeah,
probably more likely before they find out it is a lot simpler than they think. And my theory on that is we're so trained to think that if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. But in the world of dieting, like that's not true. Like just eat the right amount, mostly nutritious, have some fun stuff. You're gonna be okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like yeah, it's like you said, I feel like sometimes it is a little bit of luck in who you end up encountering when you're trying
Right.
to maybe first learn about nutrition. I'll never forget when I started working out for the first time and just, getting into nutrition and actually paying attention about it for the first time. I think I was about 17. And I
Yeah.
remember coming across it was like a video of Alan Aragon. And I was like,
Mhm.
and looking back, I'm just like, well, that was a very reliable source I could have stumbled upon for looking
Wow.
for the first time. I could have come across anyone who was just like quite wacky. And yeah, it was a reliable source who I still listen to today.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
That's what we
So
need.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it is a bit of luck as well sometimes. Um, I thought, obviously, I'm aware of your time as well, but I thought, before finishing, and because I feel like this actually gets quite overlooked as well, is on a fat loss journey. But you did mention this earlier, making it one of the first things you could do. But like, I feel like the topic of accountability can
Yeah.
be. I think accountability can be so powerful. But I'd love to hear your thoughts and where you stand with that. Maybe if someone's trying to be on their own
Yeah.
fat loss
So
journey.
I'm very biased. I think if you gave me 1,000 people and you said 500 will try this stuff without a coach and 500 will try it with a coach, I would put my life savings on the line that the people that are getting accountability are going to be more successful. And for some reason, people don't believe that. They think, oh, it's just, I know what to do. I'm just going to do it. It's like, I don't know, man. The evidence is there about coaching. The evidence is there about accountability. The Hawthorne effect. We just act a little bit differently when we're watched. Like this. all the research suggests if you want to make a change, don't do it by yourself, right? Just don't. That's really, I don't have a ton to say other than to me, it's like asking if water is important. Yes. Yes, you need it. Like, so if you're trying to make a change and the only reason you're not doing it is because you don't want to spend a little money, like, think about how much longer you're going to suffer. Like, I feel like this is, you know, call it a sales pitch for coaching, but why would you want to do this stuff alone? Like, you've already been trying. So just get a coach. It's like a fast track to success, no matter what the topic is.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like the what I often hear and like in response to that, it's like, why on earth would I pay someone to do what I can like learn online by myself for free?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, often, and number one, I guess at the end of the day, no one like quote unquote needs a coach the same way someone doesn't need a plumber or doesn't
Yep.
need
Right.
whatever it might be, but it's going to be a lot more time efficient to do it, number one. And number two, oftentimes it's like the question of, okay, you know what to do, but have you actually been doing it? And that's
Right,
a
right.
whole different ball game where oftentimes, no, 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 they
Yeah,
haven't.
like there's like, top CEOs have like business mentors, like they're not even doing it alone. So I don't know. To me, it's obvious. And I like the plumber analogy because the thought of doing all that by myself and learning how to do that, man, it's like what people like you and I actually know saves people years of knowledge and confusion.
Yeah,
So tap
yeah.
into it, people.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, even I obviously it's like you said, there's gonna be some bias here, but often like I became a coach as well, partly just because I know how powerful accountability can be. I had my own trainer at one point, and of course
Same.
that's when I saw amazing results. I whenever I for example when I was learning Japanese, I would pay a teacher for weekly lessons, and best believe I
Mm.
showed up every week and I did the homework. So there was accountability there for when I want to improve at jujitsu, which is still a goal of mine. I was like, I'm going to do a year. I'm going to pay for a year. Number one, because it was cheaper if I pay for a longer period of time. But number two, I was like, there's brilliant coaches here who I want them to keep me accountable. And I know for a fact if I pay for a year, I'm going to come for a year.
Yep.
So
Everything. Pickleball. I get pickleball lessons. Like I could just watch videos, and I do. Don't get me wrong, but you can do both.
yeah,
Someone
yeah,
in real time helping you out.
yeah, yeah. Accountability, I think it's just like it's just almost like a cheat code. Yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna say superpower, cheat code, perfect. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, Mike, was there anything on this podcast episode that we've discussed so far, or that you haven't mentioned, or that we haven't mentioned, and you feel like we could touch on quickly,
No, I mean
or you'd like
maybe
to
I
add?
I breezed past it before, but like alcohol stuff, like I'm not gonna shame anyone that drinks, and I drank a little bit at this past conference, but like if you're a nightly drinker and you want to improve your health, it's don't just think of alcohol as calories. Like it influences hunger, it affects sleep, which translate to the next day not being as motivated, being more likely to eat more and order out and not prepare food. So one of the biggest tips, and this was shared from our membership, was when I drank less, everything just got easier for me. So I don't want to take people's fun away, but I also want them to realize that alcohol isn't just calories. It's also changing a lot more behaviors that are preventing you from succeeding. So consider if you drink a lot, maybe drink a little less.
Yeah, yeah, and I know for a fact that you more than anyone, you're very aware because I've seen you speak about alcohol on social media, and like you've said, I've seen you say there's no denying that it's a great social lubricant, but
Yeah, it is, right?
yeah,
People
yeah,
will say, "Oh, there's no benefit." I say, "Yeah, but most of you guys that met your boyfriends and girlfriends and husbands and wives had a little alcohol in you on your first date. So you tell me there's no benefit. It makes people a little more comfortable, right? I think there's, a point of diminishing returns when you have six drinks, but for people to all of a sudden just say that there's zero benefit, it's like, no, think a little deeper. Like, show your critical thinking skills here. There are benefits to some people.
yeah. No, it's yeah, it's like you said, there's almost like I guess. Yeah, there is definitely benefits, but yeah, too much is
Yeah.
like a lot of things, I guess, is
Right.
gonna hold you back.
Yeah.
Uh, But yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Mike. I really appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate you coming on.
Dude, my
And
pleasure, Leo. This
at
was
the
this was
time.
fun, man. You get the gears turning. You got me at a good time right after the conference. I'm all fired up.
Oh yeah, yeah. Where was that conference?
It was in right outside of Seattle, Washington.
And
So
you, oh,
Luca
you're,
Luca Hocevar was the host.
oh yeah, I think I saw it on your stories. You're based in the East Coast, right?
Yeah, I'm in New York.
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, New York's beautiful. I used to I lived for a year in Vermont, so just
Oh yeah, yeah, beautiful. I like New England up there. Very, very nice.
me too. I really love it. I've always told myself because my wife's from born and raised in born in Massachusetts, raised for there a little while, and then raised in Connecticut as well. So yeah,
Nice.
New England's beautiful, and I've always told myself, I kind of love to live there, but the only thing that really puts me off is that freezing weather in the winter.
Yeah, it's gonna get cold soon.
Uh,
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of cold, but yeah, I don't know, man. It's I think about it a lot. I'm like, oh, we could live in California, but then you don't get the seasons. And then
no, yeah,
pros and cons. Yeah.
yeah, pros and cons, right? But yeah, thank you again for taking the time. I don't know if you want to share your like where people can find you or
Yeah, I mean, probably Instagram is the easiest at Mike Doehla. That's where I'm probably at the most. If anyone
okay.
wants to connect, ask questions, whatever. So,
Yeah, I would encourage reaching out to Mike if you have any questions. Great, great guy. And I'll leave Mike's handle in the show notes of this podcast episode, so you can just like click there for his Instagram. But again, otherwise, thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate that.
awesome. Thanks, Leo.